Hey readers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire Books, and I'm filming super early in the morning to get this in, but I read a bunch of books in July. Finally, I read a bunch of books, and we're going to do my monthly roundup. I think there's like 15 or 16 books on this list. Back to form here. So the first book I read in July was The Change by Kirsten Miller. So this book is about women who are older, so you're not having like a teenage protagonist or somebody in their 20s or 30s. These are women who are kind of beginning the second phase of their lives, where like they've had their kids, they've had their marriages, some successful, some not, and they're figuring out what they want to do with the next chunk of life as women in the world. And at this time, they all develop or, redevelop, in one case, some magical powers, and they use these powers to solve murders, which is pretty cool. So I actually think that it could have been cooler. The book was fun, but it actually almost focused a little bit too much on the crime part, and I wanted more like witchy magical sisterhood part. So I mean, it was entertaining. It wasn't quite what I was hoping it would be, but if you are looking for a book about magic with women who are not really, really young as the protagonists, then this might be a fun read for you. After that, I read A Winter's Promise by Christelle Dabos. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce her name, because the book is translated from French. It was okay. It's basically about a magical world that is made up of different kind of worlds, areas, and there's a girl who comes from the part of the world where people can like read artifacts with their hands, and she gets married to some guy from like the cold, extremely political part of the world, and it was kind of whatever. Like, it's actually I think a trilogy, and there might be another book coming out, but I'm not gonna bother to continue. I kind of felt like all the characters were a little cold. The main character annoyed me a lot. I just wasn't feeling it. Like, some of the world building parts were quirky and interesting, but I just didn't really connect with it. And so, I mean, I read it at the beginning of the month, and I'm already forgetting a lot of what it was about to talk to you for this video, which I think says a lot about how much I imprinted on the book, which wasn't a lot. After that, I read a fantastic book called Children of the Alley by Naguib MAHFOUZ'S. I actually reviewed it on the channel earlier this month. I'll put the link in the show notes. This is an allegorical tale about some people living in an alley in Cairo, but it's very clear from the allegory that these are retellings of biblical stories, stories of prophets, and Quranic stories as well. Mohamed is in there. So you're going to get Moses and Jesus and Mohamed all kind of appearing as normal people in this alley in Cairo. And the main point of the book, I think, is that it's really about people fighting against kind of bullies and strong men who are taking their unfair share of something that should belong to everyone, and society's willingness to deal with that unless there's an exceptional leader present. So in a way, the book's outlook on human life is a little bit bleak, because we'll make some progress and then it's just back to the old ways of people abusing power. But there's also a lot of hope in the way that the prophets are presented as humans who are really trying to make a different life in a different world. So I thought it was definitely worth the read. Also, this was hugely controversial when it was published in a newspaper in Egypt. It didn't make it into Egypt in book form for a long time, for decades, because people felt the book was sacrilegious and, upsetting because it depicted prophets, even though it's just an allegory. So it's also an interesting read because it's amazing, like, what will upset people in this world. But I have a whole video about that if you want to check that out. After that, I read Genderqueer by Maia. I got it for free on Kindle Unlimited, and I read it because it's the most challenged book in the country right now, and I wanted to see why. Honestly, I mean, yeah, there's some really, really vulnerable parts of the book and a couple of panels that are, about sexual awakenings and feelings, but really this is a coming of age story of someone learning how to talk about themselves in a world that doesn't have the terminology for them or the social structure to fit them as kind of a default sort of person. And I really don't see the book as problematic at all. I really think that you only have a problem with it in a big way if you just have a problem with people being different. And so I actually recommend that people read it and have a look at it. Maybe not for younger kids, but I really think anybody who's a teenager and up would be fine reading Genderqueer. And I thought it was a really good, revealing, thoughtful memoir of growing up in a world that doesn't have the vocabulary to describe you. After that, I read some old school Nora Roberts. I read The Magic Circle, which has 2 shorter stories about people in a magical family falling in love. It was okay. I mean, I don't know what I was hoping for. I've read other Nora Roberts kind of magical romance books that I liked better, but this was kind of whatever. It was repetitive, a little overwrought. The relationships didn't have enough time to really breathe. It was okay. Then after that, I read a book I loved and I reviewed it, so I will put that link below. It is A God Strolling in the Cool of the Evening by Maia de Carvalho. So I'll try not to say too much about it because I have a whole video about it, but this book is written by a Portuguese author. It's translated into English, and it's about kind of like a fictional town in Roman Portugal, like back during the Roman era in Lusitania, and a man who was a leader at a time when he didn't want the job, but nobody else was doing it. There's an invasion coming from North Africa, so he needs to protect his town. And also there's a sect of Christians who are kind of becoming more present in the town, and it's upsetting everybody else. And so he has to figure out how to handle all these crises of leadership while being someone who maybe doesn't want that in the first place and isn't really a politicker or somebody who, you know, likes to glad hand or deal with all that crap. And so his own morals and feelings about what he needs to be doing as a person conflict with what everybody thinks that he should do during his time in power. And it's just a really interesting, thoughtful book. I loved it. I thought it was so good. And what a lovely title, A God Strolling in the Cool of the Evening. After that, I read The Hotel Nantucket by Elin Hilderbrand. I just wanted like a cheap summer read to kind of come off of the more intense read I just had. And I got that. It's basically about there's a whole bunch of people. It's like an ensemble cast book where everybody is having problems in their lives, but they all kind of come together around this hotel trying to make this luxury hotel launch on Nantucket. And, you know, it was entertaining. You know, you've got relationships falling apart, relationships coming together, people falling in love, drama about a mysterious hotel reviewer that they're trying to impress, and also this hotel has a ghost. So there's a bunch of kind of fun stuff happening. Overall, I mean, the book didn't make a huge impression on me, but it was a super fun summer read, and so if that's what you're looking for, this will do it for you. After that, I read my absolute worst book of the summer, which was Firstborn by Will Dean. This is a thriller about a woman whose twin has died, and she goes to kind of figure out what happened to her twin. She's in England. The twin had moved to New York, and, you know, the family's devastated, and just something seems off to her. So the book has a whole bunch of twists. So I don't want to say too much more, but I will say that there was more than one twist, and that I hated all of them. I just didn't like this book at all. The main character is very obsessive and weird, and so like that voice was already hard to get into. And then the twist just didn't really feel believable or likable in any way. I didn't feel very satisfied at the end of the book. I just thought it was kind of weird the way that it ended. This one just really did not do it for me. I mean, I'm sure that there are people who thought it was brilliant, but after that, I was actually still thinking about Children of the Alley. So I read a book that just came out in English translation called The Story of the Banned Book, and it's about Children of the Alley. It's by Mohamed Shoair, and I actually mentioned it in my review of Children of the Alley, which is linked below. But basically, it's a book that's kind of a collection of reactions and responses to Children of the Alley over the years, including when it first came out, up to about when Naguib MAHFOUZ'S was the first air writer to win a Nobel Prize. So it was a really interesting read. I wouldn't say that it was a super like well organized read. It didn't have like a driving thesis the way that I prefer my academic books to have, but I really learned a lot about Egyptian culture of the time and the range of responses to MAHFOUZ'S book, and I just really feel like it made me have a better context for a work that just to me seemed like an innocuous read that drew on Abrahamic religion, but it was a much bigger deal at the time that it came out, and actually even up to decades later. So it made me appreciate the book and its author more, and I feel like I got a better sense of Naguib MAHFOUZ and who he really was and what he meant. So I recommend it as a read to learn from, but not necessarily a read to like a pleasure read. After that, I read another book that I reviewed this month, so I will put it down in the show notes. This one was Daddy's Gone A-Hunting by Penelope Mortimer. This book is bleak, but it's so good. The writing is so cutting and insightful. Basically, it is about a woman who is just dying of boredom and solitude in suburban Britain. And she is in this situation because she was forced to get married to her husband because she got pregnant out of wedlock and abortion was illegal in Britain at the time. It is still illegal at the time the book is set, but her daughter comes to her and says, I'm pregnant. I don't want to marry my boyfriend. I don't want to be a mother right now. Help me. And so she chooses to help her daughter get an illegal abortion. And there's a lot more going on than that. I really feel like it's a very interesting book about feminism and the need for choice and about kind of the change in generations at that time. Even though it was written in 1958, it's got like a really fresh feel to it. So if you want to read something that's kind of upsetting, I really felt like haunted by the situation in the book, just the constant drowning in loneliness and suburban shallowness of that time. The book won't make you feel happy at the end, but it'll be a very interesting read. So if you're looking for something like that, I actually really recommend it. After that, I read just kind of an interesting book that my Barnes & Noble's been pushing really hard, which was The Measure by Nikki Erlick. This is basically a novel about a world where everybody suddenly, mysteriously gets a box on their doorstep. And it says the measure of your life is inside. And then you open the box and there's a string. And it becomes clear that the string is tied to how long your life is going to be. And so there is a lot going on about like the consequences of knowing that and what knowing that means and how it impacts your life and how society would take advantage of information like that. It gets really, really interesting. So there are a bunch of different, characters whose lives are impacted by the relative length of the string in their boxes and dealing with love. Like, can you fall in love with someone with a short string and handle it if you know that you're going to live longer than them? With military service, like, are you going to be able to serve your country if everybody knows when you're going to die? And like, how does that impact where we deploy people or how people exist in politics? Or, there's like, are people with short strings more likely to kind of lose it because they know they're not going to live very long and they're set? Like, basically the book really looks into all these consequences of how things could go if we knew how long each person was going to live. And it was interesting. I think the book could have been great, maybe, but it was just really good. It was an enjoyable read, and if you're interested in that premise, then I do recommend it. It was a fun one. After that, I read 2 Blake Crouch books. They're basically like thrillers with like a heavy overlay of sci-fi, like science-y stuff on top. So the first one I kind of liked. It was called Upgrade, and it was basically about people being able to genetically alter themselves to like evolve, but this science is illegal and highly restricted, and so it's there's a guy whose mother was famous for her genetic alterations. He now works for the agency that would stop stuff like that, but a mess occurs is what I'll say. So it was pretty good. It was basically like a sci-fi beach read. It was entertaining. The one I did not like as much after that was Dark Matter, but I didn't like Dark Matter because of the kind of plot lines that I do and don't like. Basically, Dark Matter had a lot of kind of parallel universe stuff going on, and I just don't tend to like books with that. So, I think that had an audience, but that audience just wasn't me. But Upgrade and Dark Matter were both like amusing, decently written sci-fi thrillers. So if you want something that's like The Hotel Nantucket, but it's more sci-fi adventure instead of hotel drama, then the Blake Crouch books are probably really good for you. After that, I read a more academic book. It was called Unlocking the Potential of Puzzle-Based Learning. It was by Scott Nicholson and Liz Cable, and basically it is about using escape rooms in your classroom to like advance student learning. I personally thought that it was really interesting. It had a lot of points where it really kind of meditated on the right things for me, so I want to make some escape rooms this year, and that was basically why I read it. If you're into that sort of thing, it was good, but it's not like a normal reading book. This is definitely like for teachers and educators or people who like escape rooms. So, check it out if it's your thing. After that, I read I Am Malala by Malala Yousafzai. I've always been kind of curious about her story. I remember reading about her in the news. She's a girl who was shot in the head by the Taliban because she insisted on continuing to go to school. So her mission now that she survived is promoting education for girls. And I really enjoyed reading the book. I think that it might not be what everybody expected, but I felt like what she was giving was a really distinct impression of what it was like to grow up in Pakistan, a country that she truly loves. So she talks about her childhood and about how much she and the other girls enjoyed school and how the things that they felt competitive about and, you know, the way that her parents raised her. And I really feel like the book is, in a way, an argument about how easy it is for people to slip into extremism, because the way she describes it, most people around her at the time that all of this was kind of escalating were really normal people who are just kind of like unwilling to stand up to the Taliban. And so, and it also like seems like just kind of turtling and letting things pass and letting them have some of the stuff they want. It's like at first in the book, it seems like a lot of people think that's going to work. Like they make a peace deal. They, you know, just are like, okay, fine, girls will dress this way, but like, let us continue doing whatever else we want. But it's just never enough. And then by the time people really understand that, it's too late. And I kind of feel like there's a lesson for us here in the United States as we kind of start talking more about Christian nationalism and people who want to restrict our lives in increasingly kind of creepy ways. You know, it doesn't ever actually stop. That's what I learned from Malala Yousafzai's book. And so you shouldn't just try to appease and wait things out, because if you do, that's just an invitation for the other party to keep going, especially if they are very extremist, as the Taliban are. It was also really interesting to kind of see how the shooting has affected her life, in the sense that she now lives in the UK. She can't really go home, but there are people who are kind of jealous of that back home, and how many conspiracy theories swirled around her shooting and what happened afterwards. It's just a really interesting book, not so much because she's like making a powerful argument that's really focused, but because when you look at all the details of her life that she gives, you appreciate her and her family as people. But also, I think it really gives a look into how a group like the Taliban can slowly tighten a hold over a place, even though not everybody wants to live that way. And so there's like a kind of a chilling reminder that it's not as hard to lose your freedoms as you'd think. And then the last book I read this month was The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. It is inspired by the 1001 Nights, but I really like the way that she did it. So basically what we're looking at is a fantasy world that is inspired by Arab stories. And there's basically a woman who is the Midnight Merchant. She sells magical jinn enchanted artifacts. She has a bodyguard who is a jinn, and they are existing in a world where the current royal family wants to kill all jinn and thinks that they are evil, and a lot of people in the world think that. So there's the kind of fun, magical, like wheeling and dealing aspect of the characters' lives, but then they get embroiled in a royal family where everybody has different ideas about jinn and who they are, and they start chasing an artifact that could destroy all jinn. And so watching everybody kind of want this artifact, maybe want different things from this situation, gets really interesting. It's the first book in a trilogy. Basically, I would continue reading this series if I still have the right mood for it by the time the next volume comes out. And this is like, actually, I have a hard time committing to trilogies and series for this reason. So I'll really like something in the moment, but then, you know, when the next one comes around, I'm like a mood reader, so I'm distracted by something else. But I liked this. It wasn't perfect. Like there were parts where it dragged a little bit, but it was overall really good. I would absolutely read the second volume. But hopefully it comes out in time for me to be still kind of warm and not totally cooled off by the time that happens. So those are the books I read in July. As you can see, I had a pretty healthy reading month for once. It's been a while, and it feels pretty good to be back. So let me know what you read in July, or if you've read any of the same books as me and what you thought. Thanks so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and most of all, happy reading.